आज का टॉपिक है कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स एंड लिपिड्स। माई सेल्फ डॉक्टर शुचिता जैन, एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ बॉटनी, जानकी देवी बजाज गवर्नमेंट गर्ल्स कॉलेज, कोटा। अब कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स एंड लिपिड्स के बारे में हम क्या क्या पढ़ेंगे। स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ यूनिट्स। सबसे पहले ऑब्जेक्टिव, देन इंट्रोडक्शन, क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स, chemistry of monosaccharides, classification of monosaccharides, some important reactions of monosaccharides, chemistry of oligosaccharides, classification and chemistry of polysaccharides, significance of carbohydrates, और फिर इनकी समरी, ग्लॉसरी, कोई सेल्फ लर्निंग एक्सरसाइज भी हम देखेंगे, और रेफरेंसेस, which references or which textbooks you can refer. What is the objective? After studying carbohydrates and lipids, you will be able to know different types of carbohydrates and lipids, their structure and process of biological oxidation of carbohydrates. Now, introduction. Carbohydrates occupy an important place in metabolism as they are a major source of energy for all living organisms. In our food, we know very well, the chief source of carbohydrate is starch, the polysaccharide which is produced by plants, especially the cereal crops during photosynthesis. Plant starch is also the main source of energy for domestic and wild animals. Relatively large amounts of starch can be stored in plant cells in times of about abundant supply, and which is used when there is a demand for energy production. तो इस प्रकार से carbohydrates, they are very important. They can be synthesized. They are synthesized from carbon dioxide and H2O in chlorophyll containing plants during the important process, that is photosynthesis. They are made up of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen and were originally represented as hydrates of carbon. With empirical formula deoxyribose, that is C5H10O4, and glycosamine C6H13O5N. Lactic acid C3H6O3 with this general formula is not a carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are defined as the compounds having either an aldehyde or ketone group. कीटोन ग्रुप या अल्डिहाइड ग्रुप साथ में होगा जुड़ा हुआ, मॉडिफाइड अल्डिहाइड और कीटोन ग्रुप एंड अदर कार्बन एटम्स with alcoholic group. Carbohydrate, the word indicates that they are hydrates of carbon and contain carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. Most of them contain hydrogen and oxygen in the ratio of 2:1. For that reason, the general empirical formula of carbohydrate is given as CH2ON. For example, glucose C6H12O6, fructose C6H12O6 and sucrose C12H22O11 have the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen as 2:1 as we observe it in water. There are certain other sugars like rhamnose and sorbitol where this ratio of hydrogen to oxygen is not like water. Here you can see C6H12O5 and C6H14O6. Here the ratio is not like water, that is 2:1. There are certain other organic compounds like formaldehyde HCHO, acetaldehyde CH3CHO and lactic acid CH3CHOH COH, which contain carbon, hydrogen and oxygen and the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen is also the same as in water, but they are not carbohydrates. Thus, we can define carbohydrates are the substances which are either polyhydroxyaldehydes or ketones, or they are the substances that yield polyhydroxyaldehydes or ketones on hydrolysis. For example, glucose is a polyhydroxyaldehyde and fructose is a polyhydroxy ketone. ग्लूकोज और फ्रुक्टोज में क्या अंतर है? ग्लूकोज इज पॉलीहाइड्रोक्सी अल्डिहाइड एंड फ्रुक्टोज इज पॉलीहाइड्रोक्सी कीटोन. The carbohydrates formed in photosynthesis, they play an important role in the life of plants and animals. As I have told you earlier, their molecules store and transport energy which is utilized in various biochemical and physiological processes in the cell. The carbohydrates in a living cell are in a constant flux, participating in many enzyme reactions. This is necessary to convert bond energy into chemical energy for the purpose of growth and development of the cell. Many carbohydrates, they are isolated from the plants, are the components of cell wall or protoplasm and cell sap, while few accumulate as insoluble storage products. The carbohydrates occur in grains, tubers, roots, flowers, fruits and in certain other secretions. कहाँ कहाँ पाए जाते हैं? Grains, tubers, roots, flowers, fruits and in certain other secretions. In grains, tubers and roots, the carbohydrates are starch and cellulose and form the staple food for men. The wood produced by plants is cellulose. The nectar contains cane sugar and glucose. Fruits and juices of various plants also contain cane sugar and glucose. The seed husk, corn, cobs or plant gums and mucilages, they contain large amount of pentosanes. तो ट्यूबर्स, रूट्स, फ्लावर्स, फ्रूट्स या कोई सिक्रेशन है, इनमें कार्बोहाइड्रेट पाया जाता है. और किस प्रकार से? यदि वुड है तो उसमें सेलुलोज जो कि स्टेपल फूड है, स्टार्च और सेलुलोज. नेक्टर कंटेन्स केन शुगर और ग्लूकोज आपको बताया. फ्रूट्स एंड जूसेस ऑफ वेरियस प्लांट्स ऑल्सो कंटेन केन शुगर एंड ग्लूकोज. और अपने कॉर्न कॉब्स यानी मक्का जिसके भुट्टे आपने देखे हैं या प्लांट गम्स है, उसमें मिसिलेज कंटेन एंड द लार्ज अमाउंट ऑफ पेंटोजाइंस आर देयर. सीड हस्क, कोई सीड का कोट है या हस्क है, कवरिंग है, तो उसमें भी किस प्रकार से पेंटोजाइंस पाए जाते हैं. नाउ क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स. Carbohydrates are mainly classified into four main groups: monosaccharides, oligosaccharides. Now example of monosaccharides. Mono means one and saccharon means sugar. Mono means one and saccharon means sugar. They are the simplest sugars and cannot be hydrolyzed into simpler compounds. Their general formula is CnH2nOn. मोनोसैकेराइड्स जहाँ पर केवल एक ही शुगर का कंपाउंड आपको सिंपल कंपाउंड देखने को मिलेगा और एम्पिरिकल फार्मूला, इसका जनरल फार्मूला बताया गया है CnH2n and ON. Now oligosaccharides, for example, oligo means few and saccharon means again sugar. On hydrolysis they generally yield 2 to 9 molecules, 2 से 9 molecule yield होते हैं of monosaccharides which are sugars and include di, tri और tetrasaccharides. तो 2 से ज़्यादा हो सकते हैं, 2 से 9 तक. और on hydrolysis they yield 2 to 9 molecules of monosaccharides. Now polysaccharides. Poly means many, as the name indicates. The word indicates poly means many and saccharon means sugar. On hydrolysis of polysaccharides, they yield many monosaccharides, hundreds or even thousands, and are non-sugars. Their general formula is C6H10O5. Now glycosides, they are a kind of oligosaccharides which on hydrolysis yield a carbohydrate and a non-carbohydrate fragment. Carbohydrate and non-carbohydrate fragment, which may be a hydroxy compound or a nitrogen base, for example arbutin and salicin. Arbutin and salicin का example यहाँ दिया गया है. Arbutin plus water giving rise to glucose carbohydrate plus hydroquinone C6H6O2, which is non-carbohydrate. Hydroquinone, it is non-carbohydrate. Adenosine gives a pentose sugar and adenine a nitrogenous base. तो इस प्रकार से ग्लाइकोसाइड्स जो है उनमें भी कार्बोहाइड्रेट का फ्रेगमेंट और नॉन कार्बोहाइड्रेट का फ्रेगमेंट बनता है. नाउ अबाउट monosaccharides, they are further classified on the basis of number of carbon atoms present in the molecule. कितने नंबर ऑफ कार्बन एटम्स है हर मॉलिक्यूल में, उसके आधार पर इनको अलग अलग ग्रुप में बांटा गया है या क्लासिफाई किया गया है या वर्गीकृत किया गया है. दैट इज ट्रायोसिस, दे कंटेन 3 कार्बन एटम्स. टेट्रोसिस indicate 4 carbon atom. Pentosis contain 5 carbon atoms. Hexosis 6 carbon atom. Heptosis 7 carbon atom. Others are octosis and nonosis containing 8 and 9 carbon atoms respectively. तो इस प्रकार से depending upon the number of carbon atoms present in the molecule, the monosaccharides are divided as triosis, tetrosis, pentosis, hexosis, heptosis, octosis and nonosis. Example of triosis is glyceraldehyde and dihydroxyacetone phosphate. It is 3 carbon compound. Tetrosis contain 4 carbon atoms, for example erythrose. Pentosis contain 5 carbon atoms, that is ribulose and xylulose, oxyribose, arabinose, etc. Hexosis contains 6 carbon atoms, for example glucose, fructose, mannose and galactose. Heptosis, they contain 7 carbon atoms, for example pseudoheptulose. Others are octosis and nonosis containing 8 and 9 carbon atoms respectively. Oligosaccharides may be classified into disaccharides, which yield 2 molecules of monosaccharides on hydrolysis. For example, sucrose, maltose, lactose, mellibiose, cellubiose, gentiobiosis and trachelose. तो oligosaccharides जहाँ की 2 molecules of monosaccharides yield होते हैं after hydrolysis. Trisaccharides, they yield 3 molecules of monosaccharides on hydrolysis. इसमें एग्जाम्पल है जेंचियनोज, रेफिनोज and malachitose. Tetrasaccharides, they yield 4 molecules of monosaccharides on hydrolysis. For example stachyose. तो सबके एग्जाम्पल बताए गए हैं. Others are penta and hexasaccharides, which yield 5 and 6 molecules of monosaccharides respectively. Now polysaccharides, they include the following non-sugars. Polysaccharides है, जैसा आपको पहले बताया पेंटोजान्स और हेक्सोजान्स में डिवाइडेड है या क्लासिफाइड है, और इनके एग्जाम्पल बताए गए हैं. दे इंक्लूड द फॉलोइंग नॉन शुगर्स. पेंटोजान्स, फॉर एग्जाम्पल अरेबियन एंड जाइलान. हेक्सोजान्स, दे आर फर्दर क्लासिफाइड इनटू ग्लूकोजान्स. ग्लूकोजान्स में आता है स्टार्च, सेलुलोज एंड ग्लाइकोजन. फ्रुक्टोजान्स में आता है इन्यूलिन, साइनेंथ्रीन एंड ग्रामिनीन. मैनान्स में आता है मैनेन, मैनोसेलुलोज. गैलेक्टान्स में आता है गैलेक्टेन, पैरागैलेक्टेन. एंड अनदर कैटेगरी, थर्ड कैटेगरी, दैट इज पेक्टिक कंपाउंड्स. एक तो हो गया पॉलीसेकेराइड की तीन कैटेगरी मेन बताई यहाँ पर आपको, पेंटोसांस, हेक्सोसांस. पेक्टिक कंपाउंड्स दैट इज पेक्टिक एसिड है, पेक्टीन है या प्रोटोपेक्टीन है. देन गम्स, एमिनो हेक्सोसांस का एग्जाम्पल है काइटिन एंड म्यूसिलेजेस. So this was all about the characteristic features or definition of carbohydrates, about their empirical and general formula, structural formula, then classification depending upon the number of carbon atoms present in the molecule. So this was all about the general characters or definition of carbohydrates and their significance for life and their structure and classification. So if you have any queries, you can ask questions. You can subscribe YouTube channel CC Raj JDB GGC Kota. In the second lecture, we will have the detailed chemistry of carbohydrates and their properties and functions of carbohydrates. Thank you.